Here are your hosts, Kyle Fellows and Andrew Mertig. This is the Draft Fellows Podcast.
Welcome back to episode 13 of the Draft Fellows Podcast. I'm Andrew Mertig. That is Kyle Fellows, and together we form the Draft Fellows. Make sure to check out our channel on YouTube or the audio version on your favorite podcasting platform. Today we are covering the AFC West Draft Review, and if you want to check out the first 12 episodes of the series, follow the channel or the audio podcast. We did take a week off, so we're back.
Yeah.
Anything interesting going on, Kyle?
It feels good to be back. It feels like, we've been cranking these things out twice a week and just having fun getting this thing off the ground. And we just thought, like, 4th of July week, we were both really busy. We're like, it won't kill anybody to, take a couple days off. I'm sure if it killed you, let us know. All right. But we had a good time just taking some time with family and stuff like that. But excited to be back. I guess if anything happened, it could have been maybe the drop of the first episode of Hard Knocks, of course, the HBO Max phenomenon. Everyone's tuning in to see what the New York Giants have been up to over the course of the offseason. And I know you haven't gotten to the show yet, and it's like sitting right there. You're wanting to watch it maybe even tonight when we get off recording this. So I won't spoil too much for you. But my biggest takeaway, Andrew, is that like NFL GMs, front offices, scouting departments, they're just like us. Like, they do the exact same thing we do, and they have no idea what they are doing. Like, it's so obvious. Like, there have been some other, like, maybe it's Hard Knocks shows or other, like, ESPN specials that they get the inside look to what's happening behind the scenes, and you kind of feel like those guys know what they're doing. It kind of feels like the Giants, they're learning their way. Like, they've hired the young up-and-coming guys, and it just kind of feels like this is one of their first kind of rodeos, right? They're figuring this out. The director of pro scouting is actually my favorite guy in the show so far. So I feel like he's got a bright future, really, really bright guy. And you can just see like his wheels turning as they're talking about like getting rid of Saquon Barkley potentially. Like they're talking about like, well, maybe like no one's going to offer him this giant contract. And he's just sitting there like going like, somebody's going to pay this guy a heck of a lot of money. Like, let's not pretend that some contender's not going to pay this. And of course, then end up being the Eagles at the end of the day. So lots of really fun peeks behind the curtain to see what the Giants are up to. And that's the kind of stuff that we nerd out about, Andrew. So I'm looking forward to you getting a chance to watch that and maybe us getting to talk about that a little bit more here on the show.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I was planning on trying to get to it tonight. Really interesting. I did see a clip or two, specifically, some of the draft interview stuff that they showed, and Jaden Daniels, in the room with their head coach, and I think that's really fascinating. It's interesting to me too. I haven't watched it, but it's interesting to see what they want us to see, right? Because it's not just like completely unedited or the Giants have no say in what's getting released.
Right.
So, even some of that stuff like Saquon Barkley kind of makes them look bad, but they were okay with releasing it. So really interesting
100%.
to get, a peek behind the curtain, even if it's a little bit of an edited peek. That's super fascinating. And speaking of off season, we are going through each division and recapping the draft classes. So today, we're going to cover those first two teams from the AFC West, leading off with the Denver Broncos. And of course, they took their quarterback at pick 12, Bo Nix out of Oregon. They didn't have a pick again until the third round, and that ended up being edge Jonah Ellis from Utah. In the fourth, they grabbed wide receiver Troy Franklin, Bo Nix's wide receiver from last year at Oregon. In the fifth round, they get Chris Abrams-Drain, the corner from Missouri, and then running back Audric Estime. Listen, I never figured that one out. All right. Running back out of Notre Dame.
Estime.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
There we go.
And then the seventh round, two picks, Devon Vale out of Utah, the wide receiver, and then center Nick Gargiulo out of South Carolina.
Yeah, I'll correct you on Estime, but I have nothing.
Estime.
Yeah, I'm going to take
So,
a steamy shower after this episode is over. No, but
uh,
I don't know the center from South Carolina, so I'm not going to give you too much trouble there.
all right. So let's start off with Bo Nix.
Yeah, I mean, Nix is fascinating, right? Because he's had a very, I don't know if unconventional path to the NFL is the word that you would use to describe it, but I think a couple seasons ago, it was a foregone conclusion that Nix did not have a future at the next level. And so then the progression changed, right? And Oregon was a great fit for him. Arm strength is good, but probably not elite. But Oregon did a really nice job of playing to his strengths, letting him be Bo Nix, and it worked really, really well there. So decision making improved greatly there at Oregon. Obviously, Troy Franklin and that connection was good at Oregon, and it'll be interesting to see if that can continue for the Broncos. But this is a guy who I thought was really impressive in interviews, just kind of a lunch pail guy, which kind of backs up what it would take to dig yourself out of the hole that he was in as a prospect and how he was viewed, right? To kind of turn that narrative around. And so he's kind of the guy that's just going to get his business taken care of and get it done and maybe not do a lot of talking and be a rah-rah guy. So it's interesting because to me, the transition from someone like Russell Wilson now to Bo Nix and just the Sean Payton preference there. And I don't know Sean Payton, but it just feels like we don't know, like at pick 12, if this was maybe a little bit of a reach for value, but Sean Payton really wanted this, and it feels like this may be a good fit for the Broncos and what they want in their leader and at their quarterback position.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, Sean Payton had most of the success that he's had in his career with Drew Brees, and Drew Brees was all about getting the ball out on time, and if not, getting rid of it quickly, right?
Yeah,
So, yes, Drew Brees made a lot of big plays in his career, but so much of that was just, in essence, playing point guard, like get the ball
hmm
out quickly. And Russell Wilson was the polar opposite of that. He wanted to hold the ball forever and just make plays all over the place.
yeah, yeah,
And that was not Sean Payton's gig. Now, Bo Nix as a prospect didn't like him, didn't really care for him.
sure,
Maybe it was a little bit of the Auburn stuck in my mind. And yes, he definitely performed much, much better in Oregon. He developed, I think he is a pro prospect. I just didn't have like a high end first round grade on him. In fact, he was my 85th overall prospect in this class. I thought, he probably was more of a second round kind of player, even though I had a third round grade on him.
mm,
And like he's older. I question his arm strength. I think there was so much gimmicky stuff in the Oregon offense, like just get
mm,
the ball out as fast as you can. Throw, like I didn't see a lot that was going to translate into the next level.
sure,
Now, maybe Sean Payton knows more about quarterbacks than I'll ever know, and so obviously he sees something there. But just for me, like this was not the prospect that was at the top of my list, and I was very interested to see him go. Maybe sneaking in the back end of the first round, but to see
yeah.
him go really, really high, that was a surprise to me.
Well, and I think the thing is going to be so interesting is like something we'll never know. Like we'll never know if the Broncos would have taken Nix regardless of who was on the board,
Right.
or if they would have taken McCarthy. Did they prefer JJ? If like nobody saw the Penix pick coming at 8, like if that wouldn't have transpired, like did they think that one of those guys, right, would have been there at 12, and would that have changed this? We don't know. Of course, they're just going to say it was always going to be Nix. He was their guy, but just fascinating to, I don't think a lot of people thought that all 5 of those quarterbacks were going to be off the board by 12 on draft night. So another reason we love the draft, it's just so unpredictable, and value is what teams say it is, right? Like you can argue about it, but at the end of the day, when they make the picks, that's where they went. So the Broncos didn't have another pick, Andrew, until the 3rd round, and they took Jonah Ellis, the edge out of Utah. And this is a fascinating player to me. The bloodlines here are really, really strong. He is the son of Detroit Lions great Luther Ellis, and he has 3 brothers who are currently on NFL rosters. So, that bodes well for his potential in the league to stick. But I think he's going to enter the league as kind of a special teams ace and a pass rushing specialist that I mean, his brother Caden became an off ball linebacker for the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah.
And I kind of think that that's his best position. Like, it's going to be a transition because he hasn't really done it on it. And his film doesn't suggest that that's what he is right now. He's kind of that speed rusher, but he's a super athlete, freak RAS kind of a player. I think he may find a long-term home at off ball, just like his brother did. But I don't know what you saw in Jonah Ellis.
Yeah, I did grade him as an edge rusher, but I agree with you. I think there's a little off-ball linebacker there as well. Like he's undersized as a true edge. I like his first step. I love his hustle, tenacity. He plays super hard. I think he's got relatively refined pass rush moves, but being there full time, he's not going to necessarily hold up against the run on the edge, which is maybe why he's more of a hybrid kind of player. I don't want to compare absolutely everybody to Andrew Van Ginkel, but to see him sort of flourish in Miami and then sign the free agent deal in Minnesota, I think that's the kind of player you could see Jonah Ellis becoming, where it's like on pass downs moving forward, he's really valuable, but you can also play him on first and second as an off-ball linebacker, where he's not going to necessarily have to like stack and press tackles in space, because that will not be his strength. He's not super long. He's not super dense. But I think like give him a chance to get after the quarterback. And I think he can be a really productive player there.
Yeah, absolutely. Has the motor to do that. And I think that guys who love the game and have that motor, I think that they find ways to get on the field. And I think we'll see that with Jonah Ellis. In the 4th round, we talked about him already. Troy Franklin making that connection with Bo Nix, staying with his college quarterback. I don't know how crazy, but I know you've got Troy Franklin pretty crazy high on your list of your final grades, right? So he was my wide receiver 10, and I like him. I actually liked him quite a bit, but I know he's higher for you. So I'm going to let you take the ball here and run with Troy Franklin for just a minute.
Yeah, this could end up being one of those embarrassing ones in a couple of years, but I had him as wide receiver 4. I really, really liked Franklin. He's tall, he's thin, he's super fast. I think, from get-go, he can be a great 9-ball route runner. He's going to be able to take the top off the defense. What I really liked about him was his ability to find holes in zone coverage, and that's a really underrated aspect of his game. And I think that's something, you can use him on some gadget touches. I think you can use him in finding space in the zone. I think you can use him in breaking over the top. Now, he is not competitive at the catch point at this point in his career at all. Play strength is a major problem, and that is why he fell into the 4th round. But I think there's more to like about what he can do right now than what he can't. And press coverage is going to be a problem. And so if you're playing against a lot of man coverage, you may need to find ways to, put him in motion and get him free releases. But I do think, against zone coverage, I think, in off man, he's going to be able to give people fits. And that connection to Bo Nix should not be undervalued. So I really like what they got here. I'm not expecting him to have a massive impact year 1, but I think this is a guy who in a couple of years has the potential to be a really, really exciting wide receiver prospect for Denver.
Well, yeah, and Cortland Sutton is there, but like outside of that, like there's not a lot preventing him from getting snaps. I think a lot of people are still really high on Mims, but I mean, the Broncos making this investment suggests like they're still trying to find guys. They want to surround Bo Nix with talent and with playmakers. So, but yeah, I think you said a lot of the things that I would say. Hands were just okay for Troy Franklin. There were stretches where his hands were really, really good, and then there were stretches where there were questions there. And I think if it's just concentration stuff, I think that can be worked out. But it was funny, like I watched Franklin early on in the process, and I knew like that this was going to be one of your guys this cycle, because this to me was a better version of Jalen Hyatt from last year's cycle. And so you loved Hyatt. And so as soon as I watched Franklin, I messaged you and I was like, Andrew, I found your guy for this year. And it took you a little while, but it was fun for me we've learned each other a little bit over the years. And I knew that this was going to be one of your guys, because he has that speed and he has the ability to take the top off. And you like these guys, these 100 and what is he? 70-pound.
Yeah.
I'll give him 170.
Yeah,
All right.
170 is probably overvaluing his
Maybe
weight.
a little
But,
bit. Yeah.
did you want to talk about Estime at all? Now that I know how to pronounce his name.
Estime? You want to talk about
Yeah.
Estime? Yeah.
At least
No,
it didn't say S time.
Estime. Some respect for this poor guy. Yeah. So Estime is interesting. He was my running back 6, and this was not like a loaded running back class by any stretch, right? Like, but I think that he's got like kind of a complete profile. Like of all the guys, he's the one who's kind of sneaky of what he could become because he is big. I wrote down that he is kind of like a bowling ball strapped to a jetpack. And I don't know if that was my quote or if I heard that from someone else. So I'm not trying to steal it. It's been a couple months like since we went through this, but I felt like that really this was a good descriptor of how he runs because he's big, but there are actually several house calls on tape for him. And so to me, like there is a little bit of stiffness. Like this isn't like crazy elusive guy, but for me, like this, he has a pretty complete package of contact balance, power, explosiveness, and even some speed that I feel like he may actually carve out a role for an NFL offense. And in Denver, like there's a lot of questions around who is actually going to be running back 1 there. So opportunity may be there. And so I think Estime, however you want to say it, may end up being a guy who they count on a little bit even in 2024.
Yeah, I think he's a really interesting prospect, especially you get him late 5th round. He was really productive. He is just 20 years old. So there's a lot ahead of him. And, in Denver might be able to carve out a role. We'll see how Javonte Williams recovers from that injury. Yeah. We know McLaughlin is probably going to take some of those pass catching reps, but certainly some carries that could be had by Estime. All right, moving on. Kansas City Chiefs, the reigning defending Super Bowl champions. They did trade up in the first round with Buffalo, and at pick 28 took wide receiver Xavier Worthy out of Texas. In the second round, they take Kingsley Suamataia, the offensive tackle out of BYU. 2 4th-round picks, Jared Wiley, the tight end out of TCU, and safety Jaden Hicks out of Washington State. In the 5th, they get center Hunter Nourzad out of Penn State. In the 6th, cornerback Kamal Haddon, out of Tennessee. And then in the 7th, guard CJ Hansen out of Holy Cross.
This is fun. Like, I mean, are we talking about Xavier Worthy? We're just going to jump in with the headliner. Yeah. Okay. So let's not get crazy. Speed, right? Like that's what this is. That's what they wanted. He's pretty fast. I actually really like Xavier Worthy because like I'm kind of the opposite of you when I come to wide receivers, Andrew. Sometimes the guys who like are crazy fast, straight line speed guys kind of scare me because those profiles don't always work out in the NFL, or like at least they are limited in what they can do on the field. So they don't always carve out like a full-time role. They're kind of like a role player. But Xavier Worthy kind of has the complete profile other than his size, which is small, to be more than that. Like he's really pretty good over the middle of the field. He is a developed route runner. He's a competitive player, especially after the catch. He doesn't just like to make those catches and get out of bounds, stay away from like the contact. He'll fight for the extra yardage. So he's probably not a featured 1. And it's interesting because like the Chiefs, it doesn't feel like they know whether or not they need like a featured 1 or like a classic X, right? Or like someone like that. But he is absolutely going to be dynamite in this offense. And everybody talks about what Patrick Mahomes does to his value just because of how they're going to use him. And we know like Tyreek Hill and the history there with like what they've done with speed in the past. But I think that when you leave the combine setting the record for the 40, everybody gets really hyped. But I think when you drop him into that situation and you say like, this guy is actually a really good football player, not just a speed guy, I think the potential there in this offense is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, absolutely. I had Worthy as player 27. Okay. So the Chiefs got an excellent value at 28.
That's it. You just like to like, that's pat yourself on the back a little bit. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think Worthy is really fun. I think he provides an element to this team that they absolutely need. I think right away you can step in and have like very different players, but you can have them run some of the same stuff that
Mm.
MVS was running for them, in just stretching defenses over the top, and that allows you to, whether that is run underneath, dump it off to Travis Kelce, you're going to free up a lot of things, and then
Mhm.
the Tyreek Hill comparisons obviously are going to come because it's the Chiefs. But I think, the more apt comparisons that I've heard, Deshaun Jackson, obviously
Yeah.
playing with Andy Reid for a while. I think that's kind of the top end of Xavier Worthy. I think, maybe there's a little bit more of like a middling result, like Rondale Moore. And maybe there's like the disaster result of John Ross, right? Another guy who ran a crazy 40 we thought had a bunch of skills and didn't pan out. I think Worthy is a better player than that. You're spot on. I think he's better over the middle. I think he's got better hands. I think he's a relatively refined route runner coming out of college. So, I like what he provides. And I think for the Chiefs taking that swing at the end of the first round when, they have the luxury of being able to miss on a few players once in a while because everything is made up by the superstars that they have on that team.
Yeah.
I think this is a really good investment, and at worst, you have a really fun decoy over the top to occupy some safeties.
Yeah, it's really not fair that Xavier Worthy. I mean, he has to hit, but it's not fair that he went to this offense for the rest of the NFL. So that's going to be fun to watch as a fan. Pre-show, you mentioned that Kingsley Suamataia is someone that you think that it's possible that you liked too much. It's always fun to look back in your grades and be like, wow, I really, really like that guy. He graded out really, really high for me. You didn't tell me how high. So like he was my offensive tackle 10. I don't hate the value here. This is probably a little bit early for me, like where I would have liked him. But where did you, knowing that you liked him, where did you
Yeah.
have him?
Actually, he was my OT 9, but
Oh,
he was
okay.
player overall 41. So I thought
Okay.
like middle second round, really good value there. He is not ready, but I think as a
Mhm.
developmental tackle, this is exactly what you're looking for. If he was ready to play now, he would have gone in the first round because
Yeah.
he's got all of those tools to be really, really good. And I thought he was the better of the two guys. Well, there's really kind of three tackles in this class that are truly developmental. There's Kingsley, and then there was Patrick Paul and Kieran
Mhm.
Amagaji. And I thought he was the best of those three. I think
Mhm.
he's the most refined. I think, he's just 21. He just turned 21. He had a relative athletic score above 9. He's really
Mhm.
athletic. He's long. He if he can figure out how to play, and the Chiefs have a very good recent track record of developing an offensive lineman. I think he can give you a really, really phenomenal value as they're, going to face some challenges in paying the offensive linemen that they have currently, and probably looking to move on from their current tackle situation in the near future.
Yeah, and not to mention, this is a relative of Penei Sewell, the Lions' offensive tackle cousin. And I did not know this until today, and I can't figure out what the relation is. But he's mentioned in an interview that he is a relative of Puka Nakua as well. So
Oh,
there's some pretty solid bloodlines here for Suamataia. And you mentioned like super young, so like if you're gonna develop somebody like a ball of clay, like you like when they're 20, 21 years old, and so there's a lot of upside there for him as well. But Jaden Hicks in the 4th round, Andrew, this is a player that a lot of people really, really liked. And we haven't really talked about our own perspectives on this. He was my safety 6. So I thought I liked him for what he was. But I know people like Dane Brugler like had this guy as safety 1. So this is a player who's all over the map. How did you see Jaden Hicks?
yeah, I did not recall this. This is a fun thing about going back to our rankings after a couple months away. He was my safety 2, and
Okay.
49th overall player. So I thought they
Wow.
got an excellent value there. I think the Chiefs do such a phenomenal job of acquiring players in the middle of the late rounds for their secondary and then just letting them develop. They usually develop very quickly and then turn into impact players. So I think Hicks is in line to be yet another really quality
Mm.
starter in that secondary.
Yeah, I just thought he was a little bit limited, like good box safety. And again, like
Yeah.
sometimes the box safeties don't always translate in the league because you have to cover more space in the NFL than you do in college. Just the way that defenses play, like it's just you can't have as limited of a role in the NFL, or maybe NFL offenses are going to expose maybe some of those limitations a little bit more than college offenses would have. So that was some of my hang up with him, but a really, really talented player and a lot of untapped potential there in coverage that maybe he didn't show in the league as well. But I had one other shout out here I wanted to make for Hunter Norzad, the center from Penn State. This is a player, one of my favorite interviews throughout the process. Just he's pretty old, so like that's the downside to Norzad, that like you're getting an older prospect, but this is a super smart guy. He is Ivy League academics, highest GPA on the team, graduated with a mechanical engineering degree from Cornell before translating to Penn State, where he got a master's degree in business administration from Penn State. And I thought this was awesome. He loves football, super smart. His only hobby outside of football is that he likes Legos. And so like this has got like super squeaky clean prospect off the field, and a guy who's going to be like that locker room glue that holds you together. Someone you can build, a team on, like Legos.
Eh,
Yeah. No, but I
I
really
see what you
like
did there.
I enjoyed Hunter Norzad a lot, and in the 5th round, like I feel like there's a lot of potential there for him to really outplay that draft selection.
Yeah, imagine a mechanical engineer that's super into Legos. Like
Right.
who could have saw that coming?
Yeah.
I'll just shout out cornerback Kamal Hadden out of Tennessee. I really liked him a lot. He was injured, and so I think that's why he slid. I think if he's healthy, he's probably more like a 3rd round pick. And
Okay.
so, yet another example of the Chiefs getting really, really great value in that secondary. And they have a little bit of a question mark at cornerback. Not really. I mean, they moved on from L'Jarius Sneed, which obviously creates a big hole. But I think that they have some young players, Joshua Williams, et cetera, to step in and fill that. But I think Haddon can be the next guy in the line of guys, because they seem willing to let these players go when it's time to pay for them. And I think Haddon can be the next player kind of in that next wave to take over long term for the Chiefs.
Yeah, absolutely. So really exciting class this year for the Broncos and for the Chiefs. Lots of things to see how an offense that seems to dominate the NFL will continue to do that for the Chiefs, and how an offense for the Broncos may look to get some of those things going with a new quarterback and some new firepower there with Troy Franklin. But thanks for joining us on the show today. Make sure you like and subscribe to the show, and we will continue to cover each division in football over the next couple of weeks. From the draft room to the gridiron, the Draft Fellows have got you covered. Until next time, stay tuned and stay in the game.